Hello guys, this is Berman here and welcome back to another video. And today, I ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole. A couple days ago, I was talking to a person and they told me something about RFK related to him wanting autistic people to not vote and also him putting on autistic people on a registry. So when I heard that, I had to look deeper because, it could be misinformation, could be or it could be true. I know Robert F. Kennedy is an absolute crazy person. I've heard that he's an anti-vaxxer, which makes a lot of sense now that I think about it. Because we all know the primary cause of autism is vaccines. But no, in all honesty, that actually was misinformation. But during that rabbit hole, I found out that he said some other horrible shit about autistic people. Now, the registry thing is true, actually. The thing which was misinformation was the part about him wanting autistic people not to vote. To be honest, he probably does, but he hasn't said it out loud just yet. But yeah, the registry, we don't really know what's going on with that or like what he thinks it should be for. From all we know, it could be to put people on the spectrum into a concentration camp. Like I said, we do not know. Although all we know is that he did propose it, and I'm pretty sure Trump actually denied it. Rare Trump W, by the way. But it isn't only the registry that I found, and which was quite offensive that he said. Okay, so I'm gonna pull the sources up and that sort of stuff with all of this. So Kennedy says many autistic people are fully functional and regress into autism when they're 2 years old. This is kind of funny because he claims in this that it's environmental. We have no clue how autism even works, like how it is passed down. Part of it could be genetic. Like my grandfather most likely had autism on my mom's side. It got passed down to me. That's at least our theory. But that wouldn't happen. But if it was environmental, that wouldn't happen. That wouldn't like just all of a sudden the environmental factors kick in when you're 2 years old. No, that's gonna basically be with you ever since you're born. Yes, it'll be easier. You'll be able to tell that they're autistic when they're two, but you're gonna be autistic when you're born. You aren't just gonna magically turn autistic or regress to being autistic when you're 2 years old if it's environmental. Like that is just bullshit, and that actually unironically makes me think Kennedy unironically believes that vaccines cause autism. By the way, on a side tangent, I find it really funny how there's this link um right here. I don't know if that was intentional or not, although I think that's pretty funny. He also said this string of extremely inflammatory shit about autistic people. Okay, just hear me out. Hear him out, sorry. And these kids will never pay taxes, never hold a job, never play baseball, never write a poem, never go out on a date. Many of them will never use a toilet unassisted. What the hell? Ah, yes. I struggle so much with wiping my ass off every day. It's such a pain. I know. Okay, let's debunk all this. With the last statement, he clarified that he's talking about low functioning people. He also says most cases are now are severe. 25% of kids who are diagnosed with autism are nonverbal, non-toilet trained, or have other stereotypical features, so low functioning. 25% is not most. That's 1 in 4. I know math is hard, Robert F. Kennedy, but if you're claiming to be this sort of smart person who's so much smarter than those autistic plebs, just actually bring up facts. Now, they'll never go on a date. That is true. Um, Dating is really hard when you're on the spectrum. And that's just due to the fact that autism is a social disability. It affects you socially. So it fucks you up with dating. So that is mostly like, well, I mean, it's a generalization, although there is some truth to that. They'll never write a poem. Don't most people not write poems? Also, I feel like autistic people are more likely to do something like that than non-autistic people. Since if there's one good trait autistic people are known to have, they're known to be more talented than non-autistic people in like single areas. To be honest, I thought that was common knowledge at this point. Apparently, it's not to RFK. Oh boy. They'll never play baseball. Yes, people on the spectrum tend to be less athletic than people not on the spectrum. But at the same time, there are people on the spectrum who like sports, and there are people on the spectrum who are professional athletes. I used to be a huge sports fanatic. I used to be very athletic when I was young. I am not anymore due to many unfortunate circumstances, but I used to be an athletic person. And finally, he's these kids will never pay taxes and never hold a job. What the fuck? That is not an autism thing. Who told you that autistic people would never hold a job or never pay taxes? What? That's actual bullshit. What the hell? That's lazy people. And there's not really a correlation between lazy people and being autistic, or at least not that I know of. Anyways, on his rant as to why autistic, what the hell? I'm losing brain cells from this dude. Anyways, on the rant that on the same rant that I was talking about with like how autism is the end of the world and how these inferior plebeians are contaminating society and that sort of shit, he also brings up IQ. And this is interesting because IQ isn't really an autistic person's best friend, shall we say. It is very true that people on the spectrum score a lot lower on IQ tests than people not on the spectrum. In fact, if you're autistic and you have an IQ of 120 or higher, you're within the top 1% of everyone. That is how skewed the that's how much lower people on the spectrum score than people not on the spectrum. Although IQ test isn't really everything. Like in some regards, the average person on the spectrum kind of functions the same as the average neurotypical person. If you're wondering, the average from what I've seen is roughly around 85. That's just an estimate. I mean, some studies say less, some studies say more. They talk about it somewhere here. Yeah, right here. The CDC published the data in 2020 showing that 42% of people with autism have an IQ in the average or higher range. So I mean, 58% of people with autism have an IQ of 85 or less. And another study found that this figure could be as high as 60%. So there are some which say it's more, some would say it's less. 85 I think is safe. That's why I said it like that. And it's not normal. Not a normal distribution from what I know. It's skewed right, I'm pretty sure, which counterintuitively means that the mean is further left than the median. So the mean is actually like, so most people on the spectrum actually have an IQ in the 70s. This is at least from what I've seen. Okay, it says average here is considered 90 to 109. I've always thought I heard it was 85 to 115. That was the assumption I was making. With what it said down there. Let's just say mid 80s. The average person on the spectrum has an IQ in the mid 80s. That is pretty low. That's like bottom 15% in the entirety of America. So yes, the reason why, if you're wondering, is because people on the spectrum tend to score really high in one subsection on IQ tests, but really low on the other three, and that overall rounds the average lower. Now, with that tangent aside about autism and IQ and that sort of stuff, the reason why I bring that up is because even though Kennedy never directly cites that, he obviously is referencing it. He's obviously saying that, like, talking about like how we're just gonna be less functional and that sort of stuff and whatever. The thing is that, yeah, it even though like the average autistic person, the average neurotypical person, the functionality in society, even though the IQs are way different, is not much different. If you just look at IQ stats, it is bleak. Like I said, the average is around 85. If you have an IQ of 135, you're considered a genius. If your IQ is ever so slightly above 150, I'm not exactly sure about the number, you're considered gifted. The numbers are much lower. And it definitely like seems like, people on the spectrum, just by looking at that, will fail in society, or at least most of them will fail in society. Well, the reality is that that's just not true. You know, people on the spectrum function almost as well as people not on the spectrum in society, like when it comes to everyday tasks. And some fields even want autistic people, like the STEM fields especially, because people on the spectrum, I like I mentioned earlier with that one autistic talent, people on the spectrum, uh, because of that, the scientists want people on the spectrum because they can also people on the spectrum can also see things that people not on the spectrum cannot, which is which usually is like, oh, he's so weird, blah blah blah. Although that's really good in science because it can lead to new theories and that sort of stuff. That is why Einstein is known as the smartest person in the world. He has he had an IQ of 160, which is high, although you'd expect it to be much higher for the smartest person in the world. But the thing is that he's theorized to have autism, and that would have not only made that IQ seem higher, but also he was able to see things that other people didn't, and that's how he came up with the theory of relativity. So yeah, that's my daily rant about JFK's disowned grandson talking shit about autistic people and spreading stereotypes and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and dislike if you dislike, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Peace out.